Good morning, everyone. We are Group 4, and today we will be discussing on the political caricature of the American era and Japanese wartime visual. But before everything else, we would like to start this meeting with an opening prayer and singing of the national anthem.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for gathering us all today in this important endeavor. We ask that you bestow your guidance and blessing upon each attendee. May we honor one another by keeping an open mind. May we voice our truth and listen with an open heart. Bless everyone present today, that each may be able to share his or her contributions and gifts. Grant good health and safety to loved ones left outside this room, and bestow peace and goodwill to all of us. We ask for your wisdom and grace to use our talents for the betterment of others. May the various activities related to this day be a success through your intervention. With gratitude, we offer this prayer in your name. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Okay, with that started, we would like to start this activity or discussion with a short icebreaker since early pa man sa morning. So, for our icebreaker, we have three questions or three sets. The rules are simple. The questions will be presented in front. You are given 10 seconds to process the questions and 3 seconds to answer. So, let's start for our first game, for our first round. Crack the sequence. Identify the next number in the sequence. I'll be counting 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Does anyone want to answer? Okay, Ralph. Okay, what's your answer?
I would say 42.
Okay, so the answer is next slide, please. 42, correct. Okay, for our next round. If all bloops are Razzies and all Razzies are lazies, are all bloops definitely lazies? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Does anyone want to answer? Yes, Kristen.
Yes.
Okay, so the answer is yes. If all bloops are Razzies and all Razzies are lazies, meaning all bloops are definitely lazies. Okay, for our last round. Answer this riddle. It speaks and hears without a body and comes alive with sound or wind. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Does anyone want to answer? Okay, Kristen and Marielle, do you guys want to try?
Echo.
Echo? Okay, let's see if you're right. The answer is correct. The answer is Echo. Okay, guys, thank you for participating in our short icebreaker game. Now, for today, we'll be discussing political caricature of the American era and the Japanese wartime propaganda. But before anything else, let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered how a single image can influence millions of people without even using a single word? Throughout history, drawings, posters, and cartoons have played a powerful role in shaping how people see the world, especially during times of political change and war. During this presentation, we will be exploring how visual media was used during two significant periods, the American era and the Japanese wartime occupation, highlighting political caricatures and visual propaganda, and how these forms of art were not only used to entertain, but also to educate, criticize, and persuade, and even control public opinion. These images reveal how powerful visual communication can be influencing beliefs, emotion, and even national identity of the people. So to start off, next slide.
So, so now we have the political caricature of the American era and Japanese wartime visual propaganda. So this proliferation of political cartoons and caricature in media is rather a recent art form that veered away from classical art by exaggerating human features and poking fun at its subject. So this is a political cartoon that uses exaggeration and symbols, and they express social and political commentary. They became part of the print media and influenced public opinions. So such art genre and technique became a part of the prints and political commentary, which usually targets persons of power and authority. So these cartoons use symbolism to express opinions, making them more engaging and imaginative than long written editorials. So the unique way that a caricature represents the opinion and captures audiences' imagination is reason enough for historians to examine these political pieces. So, as you see here, under U.S. rule, it says that a free press allowed mass media to shape public opinions, making these cartoons worthy of historical study. However, during the Japanese occupation, the Philippine press was strictly controlled. Cartoons and comic strips commissioned by the Japanese replaced the American version, and specific themes emerged from these propaganda materials. So, analyzing these propaganda materials reveals the realities of Filipino society during the wartime. And now let's proceed to the political caricatures of the American era. So, Alfred McCoy, together with Alfredo Rosas, compiled political cartoons from Philippine newspapers and periodicals published between 1900s and 1941 in his book called Philippine Cartoons, Political Caricature of the American Era. And the sections focus on closely examining selected cartoons from this collection. So we have the first cartoon. This was published in The Independent on May 20, 1916. So the cartoon shows a politician from Tondo named Dr. Santos passing his crown to his brother-in-law, Dr. Barcelona. The main context is that the guy, as you can see here, a Filipino guy depicted wearing salakot and a barong Tagalog, was trying to stop Santos, telling the latter to stop giving Barcelona the crown because to begin with, it is not his. Now we have the second cartoon. This cartoon was also published by the Independent on June 16, 1917. This cartoon is drawn by Fernando Amorsolo and was aimed as a commentary to the workings of Manila police at that period. In the cartoon, we see a Filipino child who stole a skinny chicken because he had nothing to eat, and the policeman was relentlessly pursuing the child. A man wearing salakot, also labeled Juan de la Cruz, was grabbing the officer, telling him to leave the small-time pickpockets and thieves and to turn at the great thieves instead. So as you can see here in the cartoon, he was pointing at a massive warehouses where it contains bulk of rices and milk and of course the grocery products. Next is we have the third cartoon. So this cartoon was actually a commentary on the unprecedented case of colorum automobile in the city streets. This is entitled Death Cars Drawn by Coches Mortales. The Philippine Free Press published this commentary when fatal accidents involving colorum vehicles and taxis occurring too often already. And have the next cartoon is this cartoon depicts a cinema. So it is entitled Our Flaming Youth by Nuestra Ardiente Juventud. A blown up policeman was at the screen saying that the couples are not allowed to neck and make love in the theater, as you can see here in the screen. So the two youngsters look horrified, while an older couple seem to be amused instead.
Next, I will discuss the political cartoon published by The Independent on November 27, 1915. In the cartoon, we see a caricature of Uncle Sam riding in chariot. The chariot is being pulled by Filipino students wearing school uniforms. The students are also carrying American cultural items such as baseball bats, whiskey, and boxing gloves. These objects symbolize the strong cultural influence of the United States in the Philippines during the American colonial period. According to McCoy, the cartoon was inspired by a real event in 1907. During that time, William Howard Taft was brought to the Manila Pier on a chariot pulled by students from Liceo de Manila. Filipino nationalists criticized and condemned this event because they saw it as a sign of submission to American rule. Overall, the cartoon served as a criticism of American colonial dominance and shows how Filipinos were portrayed as being influenced and controlled by the United States. Next, please. And this caricature was published in the satirical magazine Lipang Kalabaw on August 24, 1907. It serves as a commentary on the political climate during the early years of American civil government in the Philippines. In the cartoon, we see Uncle Sam rationing porridge to the politicians. The porridge symbolizes political favors, benefits, or support coming from the United States during the American colonial period. First in line are the members of the Progresista Party, also known as the Federalista Party, eagerly receiving their share, symbolizing their close alignment with the U.S. interests. Behind them are the members of the Nacionalista Party, waiting impatiently for their turn. This cartoon suggests that politicians from both parties were seeking and competing for U.S. patronage. It criticizes how political leaders depended on American support instead of focusing on true national independence.
Next we have is the propaganda comic strips in the Tribune. Now, the Tribune here is actually a known and trustworthy Filipino newspaper during the American period, mainly because it was anti-Quezon and anti-American. It fell in the hands of the Japanese and became the central organ of their propaganda during the war. It released various news and feature articles that hailed Japan's campaign in the Philippines, reporting that victory against the United States was imminent. It was also featured it also featured several comic strips whose goal was not only to entertain, but to win the hearts of Filipinos to support the goal or cause of the Japanese. Now, the comic that you can see in the screen is actually a comic strip series created by a Filipino cartoonist named Ross. This was released on August 23, 1942, and this strip basically persuaded Filipinos to learn the Japanese language, also known as Nihongo, by highlighting certain benefits. One, this can be used as a secret language for lovers, as pictured in the lower right of the panel, where the woman responds to a declaration of love with shh shh. Let's Lola's learning Nipongo or um Nihongo too. That's what she said. And it could be a way to expand business by catering to Japanese customers, as seen on the left side of the panel. It could also be a way to befriend Japanese soldiers, as seen in the panel too.
So now we are going to discuss about the comic strips from the Calibapi family series by Tony Velasquez. So we're gonna focus on the Taisa, which is the first comic strip released on October 17, 1943. So in the story, Nana wakes up her younger brother Totoy early in the morning so he can join Taiso. So Taiso is an exercise program promoted by the Japanese government during the occupation.
But Totoy does not want to wake up, and their mother tells Nene to stop bothering him. But Nene insists. She says Totoy needs to exercise because he is a boy and should grow up strong enough to become a soldier. So this comic may look like a simple family scene, but it shows something important. It shows how Japanese programs became part of daily life, and even children were taught discipline and prepared for like military. Occupation influenced families and young people. So next slide, please.
So now we're going to show the second comic strip, which is The Adventure of Tio Tasho. So this was released on December 7, 1943. So in this story, Tio Tasho goes to a cafeteria after doing some small business. When he sees that a plate of chop suey and a rice costs 3.50 pesos, which was expensive during that time, he was shocked. But even so, he still ordered the food. While eating, he hears someone says that the restaurant might be serving cats instead of chickens.
So this makes him very worried. So this comic shows how the hard life
During his occupation. So food was expensive and there were shortages. So people were very unsure about what they were eating, and through humor, the comic shows the struggles and worries of Filipinos during wartime. Next slide. In the last comic strip, which is the Nana's Prayer, Nana is praying before going to bed. She says the Our Father nga prayer. So when she reaches the line nga katong give this day our daily bread, she stops. And she realized wala man sila bread. So she changes the words and says, give us this they are daily kamote. So this small moment is very meaningful because during the war, kamote became a common food because rice and bread were hard to find. So the comic shows how war affected everyday life, and it shows poverty and hardship, but it also shows faith and hope. So even in difficult times, Dana continues to pray. Next slide.
So moving on to the analysis of political caricatures and comic strip. This lesson focuses on political cartoons and comic strips during the transition of the Philippines from Spanish colonial rule to American occupation. So to begin with, the political caricatures discussed in this lesson reflect the changes in culture, society, and politics during the American period. These cartoons served as a way for Filipinos to express opinions and reactions to the new colonial power. Through images and symbols, artists were able to comment on political and social conditions at that time. Next, we look at the American occupation and its effects. So the Americans introduced democracy to the Philippines. However, the results were not ideal. While democratic ideas were introduced, many Filipinos struggled to fully understand and experience true democracy. On the positive side, Filipinos were exposed to aspects of modernity such as improved healthcare, modern transportation, media, and a freer and more open press. Next slide, please. Now, moving on to the social and economic inequality shown in the cartoons, Filipino experiences during the post-occupation period varied depending on social class. The Principalia or elite class benefited economically when the Philippine economy was open to the United States. Meanwhile, the majority of poor Filipinos remained poor, experiencing desperation, and were often victims of state repression. These inequalities were clearly highlighted in political caricatures. The cartoons also revealed several political problems. Filipinos had difficulty fully understanding the essence of democracy and how democratic institutions and processes worked. During this period, dynastic politics began to rise, with families holding power across generations, such as those seen in places like Tondo. And lastly, patronage politics became powerful. This system existed between patrons and clients and even between political parties and the United States. Political caricatures exposed how power and influence were often based on personal connections rather than equal representation.
So, political caricatures during the American period served as important tools for expressing social criticism. They revealed the realities of inequality, political confusion, and power struggles during the transition period in the Philippine history.
Next is the political parties and democracy. So, as shown in the picture, the United States, symbolized by Uncle Sam, supported Federalista Party members. Nationalists, while nationalist politicians were shown waiting for their turn. So, the real political competition was weakened and voters' choices were limited because of the party switching by politicians became common depending on which party was dominant. Next, now for the cultural and social transition. So the society shifted from Catholic-centered Spanish Filipino to Imperial US assimilated. So because of this, modern transportation increased, especially motorized vehicles. Thus, automobiles became common and led to the rise of taxis, which led to problems with modernization because of the laws and policies implementation were weak and mediocre, resulting in increase in colorum or illegal vehicles and growth of unlicensed transportation um, in cities. So overall, this period brought modernization but also political and social challenges.
Now, moreover, the political cartoons and comic strips reflect the social changes and hardships that Filipinos experienced under foreign rule and rapid urbanization. Now, early cartoons showed weak law enforcement, traffic chaos, and shifting morals, such as the sexual revolution of the 1930s, which marked the clash between conservative traditions and a more modern future. Now, other cartoons criticize social inequality under American rule, showing how authorities oppressed poor Filipinos while protecting powerful hoarders, and how the US subtly controlled Filipinos by shaping their thinking and behavior. So these political cartoons were more than just simple drawings. They were subtle but powerful commentaries on the realities that Filipinos faced during foreign rule and rapid modernization. So by highlighting problems like the weak law enforcement, social inequality, and shifting morals, the artists exposed the tensions between traditional Filipino values and Western influence, which they also criticized how colonial authorities protected the powerful while oppressing the poor, revealing the unfair systems in place. And in doing so, the cartoons became a quiet yet impactful form of resistance and national awareness. Next, please.
So, on the other hand, during the Japanese occupation, comic strips became propaganda tools due to strict censorship. The Japanese controlled newspapers and publications, allowing only content that supported their rule. This forced comics to follow government approved themes. Filipino artists were not allowed to openly criticize the Japanese government or its military, as any form of criticism, satire, or political commentary was considered dangerous and could lead to punishment, imprisonment, or worse. So instead of criticism, they promoted Japanese programs like learning the Japanese language and Review Taiso. These programs were presented as cultural and educational initiatives but were actually tools to influence Filipino behavior and thinking. These programs linked discipline and exercise to militarism and obedience. By encouraging routine exercise and strict discipline, the Japanese promoted values aligned with military training and unquestioning obedience to authority. However, these comics also revealed the harsh realities of World War II: hunger, food shortages, and daily suffering. Even without direct criticism, everyday scenes in the comics reflected the real struggles Filipinos faced under occupation. Stories about food substitutes showed how scarce basic goods had become. Items like banana ketchup or burnt rice coffee emphasized how people were forced to adapt to extreme shortages. Disgust over extreme measures like eating cats highlighted moral limits. Prayers acknowledging the lack of bread reflected deep food insecurity. And although presented as propaganda, these comic strips were created by Filipinos. And because they were Filipinos, they understood the lived experiences and suffering of ordinary people. These comics can be read as subtle resistance. They quietly expose the failures of the Japanese regime. Even without openly blaming the occupiers, the comics showed hunger, hardship, and unmet expectations. They also revealed the difficult conditions Filipinos endured during the war. In this way, comic strips became historical records of survival, resilience, and quiet defiance. Next slide, please.
Okay, so now I'll be discussing why the topic matters. So first, they show the real life of the past. So while our textbooks gives us dates and names, these cartoons show us how people actually felt and lived. For example, during the Japanese occupation, comic strips like Nene's Prayer show the sad reality that families couldn't afford bread and had to eat kamote or sweet potato just for them to survive. They turned history into a human story that you can see. Next slide, please. So second, they show how leaders try to control people. So these images are proof of how governments use media to change the way people think, like how in the American era, cartoons showed how the US used things like sports and fashion to influence Filipino culture and subjugate their minds, while in the Japanese era, the government used propaganda comics to force Filipinos to learn a new language and support the Japanese military. And then next, they they show Filipino bravery and wit. So even when the press was censored, Filipino artists were clever. They used their drawings to hide secret messages of resistance. For instance, they would draw characters complaining about the high price of food to quietly show that the Japanese government was failing to take care of the people.
Now on to how Philippine history and nationalism shows through caricatures. Next slide, please. So from during the Philippine Revolution, nationalism did not disappear, it transformed. Under the American rule, the struggle shifted from armed resistance to political negotiation. Filipinos were trained for self-government, but under American supervision. So although democracy was introduced, cartoons revealed that the power remained concentrated among elite families, patronage politics, and dynastic control began taking root during this period. This is a significant era because many political patterns today trace back to this colonial democracy. Culturally, American education and media reshaped Filipino identity. English became dominant and Western ideals were promoted, while modernization occurred. It also fostered colonial mentality that the belief that foreign systems were superior. Thus, nationalism during the American period was complex. Filipinos were learning democracy, but within the limits set by a colonizer. Next slide, please.
So first, let us talk about Asia for Asians ideology. So during World War II, the Empire of Japan promoted the idea that Asia should be ruled by Asians, not Western powers like the United States. Japan presented itself as a liberator of the Philippines from American imperialism. They claimed they were helping fellow Asians regain freedom. However, in reality, this was all still a form of occupation. Instead of true independence, Filipinos experienced another layer of foreign control. This shows that nationalism during this time was being manipulated. Japan used anti-Western propaganda to win Filipino support, but their actions did not fully match their promises. Next is media as a weapon. So during the Japanese occupation, the press was heavily censored. Newspapers like the Tribune were controlled by the Japanese. Comic strips such as Kalibapi Family by Tony Velasquez promoted Japanese programs like learning Nippongo and doing radio taiso exercises. This shows how media became a tool for political control. Instead of criticizing the government like in the American period, publications were used to promote obedience, discipline, and loyalty to Japan. Nationalism was shaped not just through politics but through newspapers, images, and everyday reading materials. Next is everyday hardship. So, despite propaganda showing discipline and order, reality was very different. There was food scarcity, inflation, and suffering. In Nene's prayer, instead of asking for daily bread, she says daily kamote. This is because kamote became a wartime staple because rice and bread were scarce. This reflects how nationalism was no longer just about speeches or revolutions. It became about survival, and ordinary Filipinos experienced hunger, fear, and economic hardship. Their daily struggle became part of the national story. And lastly is resilience and subtle resistance. Even though comic strips were controlled, Filipino artists still found a way to reflect truth. Beneath the surface of propaganda, they showed how hardships people faced and how survival itself became a quiet form of resistance. So, when we connect this to Philippine history and nationalism, we see that nationalism did not only grow during the revolution against Spain, it continued to evolve under American democracy and Japanese occupation. It was shaped by colonization, propaganda, hardship, and resilience. Next slide, please.
Okay, so in conclusion, in Philippine history and nationalism, Filipino nationalism wasn't just born from revolutions or protests. It also grew through everyday resilience, through adapting to new rulers, and even through art like cartoons and comic strips. Despite hardships, Filipinos found ways to preserve their identity, showing that nationalism is as much about survival and creativity as it is about fighting for freedom. Like during the American period, democracy was introduced, but it mostly benefited the elites. During the Japanese occupation, propaganda was used to influence how people saw their national identity, and even with censorship and hardship, Filipinos stayed resilient. This tells us that nationalism wasn't just about fighting revolutions, it was also about adapting and surviving.
So now we'll be having our quiz to put our learnings to the test. So I encourage everyone to participate. So number one, why do historians consider political caricatures worthy of historical examination? So A, they are more detailed than written editorials. B, they were the only art form allowed by the Americans. C, they capture the audience's imagination and reflect public opinion. And D, they are perfectly accurate photographs of history. So what is the answer? Yes, Ashley.
B.
Okay, that's correct. Thank you. So next question, please. What happened to the Philippine press during the Japanese occupation? A. It became completely free and uncensored. B. All newspapers were shut down and replaced by radio. C. Only newspapers under Japanese control were allowed to release propaganda. And D. Journalists were forced to write only in Spanish. Okay, yes, Kristen.
C. Only newspapers under Japanese control were allowed to release propaganda.
Okay, that's correct too. So next question, please. In the 1916 cartoon, a public post is not a hereditary crown. What is being criticized? So A, the high cost of jewelry for officials. B, the rise of dynastic politics where power is passed to family. C, the lack of traditional hats worn by politicians. And D, American refusal to let Filipinos hold office. A, Ashley.
B. The rise of dynastic politics, where power is passed to family.
Okay, thank you, Ash. Next question, please. Okay, what was a major goal of the 1942 comic strip? Now I've seen everything. So A, to celebrate the return of American forces. B, to persuade Filipinos to learn the Japanese language or Nippongo. C, to encourage rebellion against the Japanese. D, to warn people that telephones were dangerous. Okay, C, Vince.
Is it B? I wait. Is it B?
Yes, it's B. Thank you. So next question. So in the death cars, cartoon, what symbol shows the danger of unlicensed cars? So A broken bridge, B, the Grim Reaper or Death riding in a colorum car, C, an American soldier directing traffic, and D, a clock showing people were in a hurry. Yes, ish.
B.
Okay, that's correct.
For the next question, what does Nana's prayer reveal about the Japanese occupation? A. Religious services were strictly banned. B. There was extreme food scarcity with kamote replacing bread. C. Everyone had plenty of food provided by the military. And D. Bread was considered bad luck. Yes, ish.
B.
Okay, that's correct. Next question, please. How did Filipino cartoonists like Tony Velasquez use their work as a form of resistance? A. By drawing giant battle scenes of Americans winning. B. By hiding subtle critics of the occupiers' failure to provide food. C. By moving their offices to the mountains. And D. By refusing to any Japanese words. Yes, Marielle.
B.
Onseto.
B.
Okay, that's correct. Next question, please. What does the 1907 cartoon of Uncle Sam rationing porridge to politicians represent? A harvest celebration shared with the world. B. The U.S. giving equal wealth to every Filipino family. C. A system of patronage where politicians relied on American favors. And D. The introduction of healthy American breakfast foods. Yes, Eunice.
Letter C.
Okay, that's correct. Next question. Why did the Tribune newspaper become a tool for Japanese propaganda? A. It was the only paper that could print in Japanese characters. B. It had always been a Japanese owned company. C. It fell into Japanese hands and was used to report their imminent victory. And D. The Americans sold it to the Japanese to keep the peace. Yes, Franchel,
C.
that's correct. Next question, please. According to the lesson summary, what is the lasting impact of American colonization? A. Filipinos completely forgot their Spanish Catholic heritage. B. It immediately ended all forms of political corruption. C. It shaped the government and institutions that still exist today. And D. Every Filipino family was given a free car. Yes, Stephanie, Nicole.
C.
Okay, that's correct.
With that, we have concluded our presentation on Philippine caricature and American caricature during wars and times. So, with that, we are Group 4 from BSN2B and we thank you.